Someone shut the cave from inside. Footprints stop at the threshold. The dust around them is clean. Inside, something smells old and iron-rich. And then the cave answers back. It wasn't a cave. It was a workshop of silence. Every swirl looks fresh. It should look older. Near the wall, tools were hung like prayers. A narrow shelf holds dried herbs and ash. In the corner, a single bed carved from stone. He didn't block the world, he sealed it out. 30 years should have made this place collapse. But the stone bears his rhythm, not time. Somewhere deeper, there's a sound that shouldn't exist. We follow the carvings like footprints made of devotion. Even his water route is carved, channel by channel. Then we see it, an empty space shaped like a cage. What was he keeping safe from himself? Outside, the mountain still waits. The cave doesn't breathe. We're not here for answers, yet only for what he left behind. Something breathed behind the stone. The floor shows a trail, then stops mid-breath. A thread of smoke curls from nowhere. In the carvings, his hands linger like a curse. Listen, those marks aren't decoration. They're directions. If you follow them, you reach the cage-shaped gap. The empty center is cleaner than the rest of the cave. Around it, he built channels to move water away. The bed is close, too close to ignore. Herbs hang in bundles, dried to bone-dark colors. He kept medicine close. But what for? On the far wall, the carvings repeat a spiral rhythm. They don't just spiral. They point to one spot below. The sound we've been hearing finally sharpens here. It's not wind. It's too regular, like breathing counted. At the entrance, footprints vanished long ago. Yet the cave stayed cared for, like he never left. And that deeper sound, now it has a direction. So the question tightens, what was he keeping contained? Because the carvings answer back, but not yet. The carvings weren't decoration. They were routing. Follow the spiral, and the stone starts to feel guided, like the cave is steering breath and sound toward one place. And that's when the first real problem makes itself known. The cave doesn't stay silent at night. It remembers things, old pressure, old echoes, and it pushes back on him. He tries to ignore it. He lays the same cloth by the bed. He grinds the same herbs. But every time his medicine storage clicks into place, the sound from deeper inside shifts closer. But here is what nobody talks about. The cave started cleaning itself. Not with water, with time, with force. Like something inside was scrubbing away any proof he ever lived here. That unnerving neatness spreads. A trail that used to blur at the edges now stops with precision, as if the cave decided where footsteps are allowed to go. When he listens, he can place the sound. It isn't random. The resonance lands in one exact hollow under the spirals, like a fingertip tapping from far away. He thought he was building a sanctuary, but the cave learned the rhythm of his hands, how long he waits, how he pauses, how he reaches for the latch. The sound answers on the same beat. Then the second complication slips in, quiet as grit. One morning, a small portion of carving is different. The spiral has been corrected by no hand he recognizes. He checks the entrance. No tracks. No weather. The mountain is too still. Which means the change happened below, inside the part of the cave he never fully reaches. That's the open loop, tightening again. The resonance area is where the cave answers, but it never shows itself. It only adjusts. It only corrects. And eventually, it will demand a reply. His supplies used to last. Then, without any sign of tampering, the same medicine jars feel emptier. The cave isn't taking them loudly. It's taking them like a bargain. He tries the old rules. He speaks softly, he avoids sudden movements, he doesn't look too long at the clean void. But the resonance has started to carry shapes in the sound. Some nights he wakes with soot on his fingers, though his fire is out. The carved channels still breathe smoke, as if the cave cycles its own lungs while he sleeps. He returns to the spiral directions one last time and notices a detail he missed before. The chisel marks aren't equal. They're measured, like instructions meant for someone who comes after. And that's where Open Loop 2 starts to show its teeth. Past the halfway point of the carvings, past what he ever intended to reveal, there's evidence he used to know something trapped down here. He never reached that far. Not with his body. He kept himself near the bed, near the medicine, near the cage-shaped void, always within arm's length, always protected by distance he could control. But now the cave is forcing the distance to shrink. The resonance spreads through the floor like a stain that wants to become a map. And his bed is too close to where it's growing loud. When he finally decides to step away from the bed, the cage-shaped void stays clean, but the air around it changes. It turns sharp, like metal warming before lightning. He reaches for the carved direction that leads past the halfway point. His hand hovers. You can feel it in the silence. The cave doesn't want him to go, yet it wants him to understand what's there. And when his finger touches the stone, the resonance finally locks on, not as an echo, but as a response waiting for a name. Waiting for the voice that carved the first line. The first sign wasn't loud. It was a subtle shift in the air, like the cave inhaled and forgot to exhale. He woke with his fingers numb, reaching for the bottle he kept by the bed, and the space felt wrong. The resonance wasn't just in the stone anymore. It was carrying itself toward him, quietly, like something learning his habits. When he pressed his palm against the wall, the carved swirl answered with a faint vibration beneath the sandstone. He had always timed his medicine. Morning, evening, always the same. But that day the taste hit different, stronger, harsher, like it had been sitting in the dark too long. He checked his measuring cup twice. Then again. No spills. No tracks. Yet the level was lower, and the cavity where he rested the bottle felt colder than it should. The cave wasn't consuming anything visibly. It was taking just enough to keep him off balance. He stopped carving. That was his rule when something didn't add up. So he watched. He sat still by the bed, shoulders tight, listening to the cave's quiet grammar. For minutes nothing happened, just the soft crumble of old dust. Then the resonance returned, but from a different angle, like sounds sliding along hidden ribs. The carved swirls near his feet looked freshly wet, as if a thin film had formed overnight. He hadn't moved. The stone had. But here is what nobody talks about, how the cave changes when you get comfortable inside it. He had lived with peace for years, carving little circles to smooth his mind. Now the carvings weren't just patterns. They were measurements. Past the halfway depth, the spirals stopped looking like decoration. They started looking like routing. His fingertips found a groove that felt too exact, too deliberate, as if someone had traced it after him. When he tried to pull away, the vibration held him in place, gentle but insistent, like a hand that wouldn't let go. The air grew colder around his wrist. Not outside the cave, inside his skin. His pulse sounded louder against the stone, and the carvings began to hum with the rhythm of his breathing. He tried to stand, but the resonance pushed back, redirecting his weight toward the bed like a magnetic mistake. When he looked up, the ceiling spirals seemed tighter than before. Same stone, same place. But the geometry had shifted in his perception, as if the cave was reconfiguring the space to keep him reachable. He swallowed, tasting dust and something metallic. He forced himself to remember how he got here. 30 years, and he never asked the surface questions. He just ran from people, from noise, from promises that didn't last. But some memories arrived late, like trapped birds finding their way out. He'd learned something once. Not from a book. From a warning carved in stone that he didn't understand at the time. Now the message felt closer. The half-depth section had a different cadence to the swirls, spaced like steps. Like instructions for a mouth that couldn't speak. He moved his hand along the carvings with extreme care. No sudden touches. No scraping. Each time his finger crossed a certain groove, the hum changed pitch. It was subtle, almost like the cave was tuning itself to him. His eyes watered, not from fear, but from the effort of staying steady. The resonance wasn't random. It followed a pattern that matched the way he used to count time. Morning by carvings, evening by silence. The cave knew his count, as if it had listened through the years when he thought he was alone. His medicine cup sat within arm's reach. The liquid inside was nearly gone, but the bottle looked sealed. He leaned close, expecting to smell rot, something ruined. Instead, he smelled clean solvent, fresh, cold, unnatural. That's when he noticed the resonance pulling the aroma toward the wall. Not with wind, with intention. The cave's silence wasn't empty. It was holding pressure, like a held breath waiting for permission. He tried to recite prayers he'd stopped believing, but the syllables snagged on the hum, as if the stone didn't want his voice to form. Then the cave did the one thing shelters never do. It rearranged the sound of his breathing into an answer. The hum formed a low pattern, spaced like syllables, and for a moment he felt the hair on his arms lift under the sleeve. He stopped breathing on purpose. The hum stopped too. He held the silence until his lungs burned. When he inhaled again, the pattern returned, sharper, closer. It didn't echo him. It responded to his choices. As if something down there was learning how to talk using his body as a tuning fork. He tried something different. He stepped away from the wall and sat with his back to the bed, forcing distance between his skin and the carvings. The cave's hum softened, like it disliked the separation. He relaxed just enough to believe he, D1. Then he heard it. A new vibration came from beneath the sandstone, not from the carved face. It traveled upward toward the spot where his medicine used to sit. Something was pulling on the same route the resonance used before. The cave wasn't just correcting itself. It was following a path to reach what he carried inside himself. A line of carvings emerged where there had only been plain stone. Not carved in front of him, like it had always been there and had waited for the right moments. The new grooves were smoother, darker, and they angled away from the bed toward a deeper section. He traced them with his eyes, not touching. The distance felt suddenly longer, as if the cave expanded on command. His breathing turned shallow. The medicine bottle trembled slightly, though the shelf did. And when he looked back at the spirals, they seemed to rotate in the candlelight, not physically moving, just changing how they caught shadow. That was worse than motion. That was awareness. He whispered his own name just once to anchor reality. The sound bounced off stone and returned wrong. It came back delayed, as though the cave had to think about where to place it. Then the hum sharpened, and the spirals near the bed pulsed with resonance that felt like a pulse under skin. He backed away, but the correction followed him. The void between the carvings, where it used to look unnaturally clean, seemed to deepen, drawing light into it. His candle flame leaned toward the darkness like a compass, seeking something beneath. He realized the open space wasn't empty at all. It was an intake. He remembered the old story he'd never believed. That some places keep what you give them. Not in jars. Not in cages. In patterns. His medicine was a pattern. His counting was a pattern. His touch was a pattern. And now the cave had enough of him to start making choices. When he stared at the halfway depth spirals, the spacing looked like something he'd drawn before, years ago in a notebook he no longer owned. He pictured his own handwriting, then tried to picture the notebook itself. The image slipped away, like the cave had already erased it. Only the sensation remained, like a secret wiped clean, except for the bruise it left behind. He stood anyway. He couldn't let his body be controlled by resonance. With a slow breath, he moved the medicine bottle away from the bed and toward the cave's outer wall, where he'd carved a small shelter not years ago. The bottle slid too easily, like the shelf was greased with invisible film. He reached for a piece of cloth to wrap it. When his fingers touched the cloth, the resonance snapped back, suddenly louder, as if the cave disliked being denied its root. The floor gave a tiny shudder. Somewhere beneath, something answered by tapping once, one clear beat traveling upward through stone into his bones. He didn't touch the wall after that. He kept his hands open, empty, as if he could negotiate with absence. The cave's hum changed again. It stopped sounding like a response to breathing and started sounding like counting again. 1 pause, 2 pause. The pauses were too even. Too human. He felt his mind reach for meaning the way a hand reaches for a light switch in darkness. And that's when the carvings near his bed altered their pattern by a fraction of a degree, just enough to align with the new line of grooves deeper in. Open loop 2 tightened. He wasn't being warned. He was being guided. Past the halfway point, he'd once left a key for himself, only now the key was being used. The tapping began to repeat, but faster now. Not frantic. Focused. It came in rhythms that matched the spacing of the new carvings, as if the stone below was reading them like a score. He covered his ears and still heard it, because it wasn't only sound. It was vibration through the floor. His vision blurred at the edges. He tasted the metallic solvent again, stronger, like the cave was pumping something upward through the same intake. And then he realized what he'd been avoiding. The cave didn't need his medicine to survive. It needed his body to carry the resonance into the void. It needed contact without leaving a mark, so it could speak from inside him. He forced a decision. If it wanted a conversation, he would answer with words, not touch. He faced the void and spoke slowly, each syllable set like a brick. But the resonance twisted his voice. His mouth shaped language, yet the sound returned as a different cadence, as though something else were borrowing the grooves of his breath. He grabbed the bottle again, not to take it, just to hold it like a boundary line. The bottle grew heavy in his hands, and the carved wall grew warmer. A locked-in response approached, not by violence, but by certainty. The cave had waited decades for this moment to align. At the halfway point, the spirals looked almost freshly carved again. The edges were sharper, the grooves deeper, like time had been rewound and then pressed forward. He stared until his eyes hurt, trying to see the hidden pattern his past self left. The cave offered it in pieces. First the spacing, then the angle, then a small junction carved like a thumbprint indentation. His mind recognized the shape before he could remember why. He didn't realize he'd leaned closer until the candle flame bent so hard it nearly went out. The thumbprint indentation waited for his fingertip, the way a lock waits for a key. And his hand moved, not fully controlled. His fingertip touched the indentation. No scrape. No pressure noise. The cave answered instantly, like a switch flipped behind the stone. Resonance snapped into a full chord that filled his teeth. The void brightened with a faint, sickly sheen, as if something inside had turned its attention outward. He tried to pull away, but the vibration held his skin in place, warm now, almost welcoming. The carved swirls tightened into a single flowing path, guiding energy toward the bed, toward the missing medicine, toward his heartbeat. He felt the cave reading him, finding the rhythm that made him useful. In that chord, he finally understood what the secret was. It wasn't trapped beneath the mountain. It was trapped inside the choices he kept making. When he spoke again, his words didn't matter. The cave had already taken the turn. The resonance rose into a steady hum that sounded less like humming stone and more like a voice learning a mouth. He felt his medicine circulate wrong, as if it had been rearranged in the dark. The bed area tightened with invisible force, pulling his attention toward the carved path he'd never noticed before. The shelter that had once held him like a parent now behaved like a lock, turning from the inside. He wasn't alone in the cave. He was being addressed, one careful vibration at a time, and the next answer was coming. He thought the cave was passive. It is. Every night the air tastes sharper, like stone has teeth. He reaches for his flask, and the metal feels wrong, too cold, too clean. When he lifts it, the liquid is gone. No spill. No wet tracks. Just emptiness where comfort used to be. He checks the floor anyway. He drags his fingertips across the grit. The stone answers with nothing, dry, untouched, as if the cave erased the evidence while he slept. He turns toward the wall carvings, and the swirls seem to deepen in the candlelight. It feels like being measured. Then he notices his breathing is being echoed. Not by wind, not by walls alone. The resonance returns exactly when he exhales, like a delayed reply. He stops, and the echo pauses too. He coughs once, and the cave answers with the same hollow rhythm. That's when dread stops being a feeling and becomes a direction. But here is what nobody talks about. The carvings aren't just decoration. They're instructions. Past the halfway point, there are deeper channels that guide where your finger goes, like someone planned for a hand that would eventually panic. He presses one groove and feels it resist, then yield, as if the stone remembers pressure. He tries to ignore it. He steps back, then forward again, testing distance like a skeptic. The resonance shifts. The cave doesn't follow him, it corrects him. When he moves away, the echoes distort, stretching longer than they should. When he returns to the grooves, the sound snaps into place, clean and exact. A tapping starts. Not random. 3 quick strikes, a pause, then 2 slower ones. His pulse sinks without permission. He follows the rhythm with his fingertips along the channels, and the tapping travels too, like something moving behind the stone. The cave is guiding him, but not towards safety. He finds a spot where the sandstone looks smoother, like it was finished for one moment of contact. When his fingertip touches it, warmth blooms under the skin. Not from the candle, from within the walls. The tapping stops instantly, like whoever's controlling it is listening now. His eyes follow the swirls upward to a seam he never noticed. It's narrow, almost invisible, but it runs behind the carvings like a hidden zipper. He presses again. The seam tightens, then loosens with a sound like stone sighing. A thin draft slides across his fingers, cold air from somewhere deeper than the cave should have. He backs away, then can't. The seam seems to call him with pressure changes, like the cave is inhaling. His medicines are already gone. His breath is being mirrored. Now the wall itself begins to loosen around him, not collapsing, opening with care, like hands working from the other side. Inside the seam, something glimmers. Not treasure, not gold. It's a dull, wet shine, like glass under skin. He leans closer, and the sound changes, no longer echoing him, but filtering him, smoothing his voice into something that doesn't belong to his throat. He realizes the cave isn't copying. It's rewriting. The first major complication isn't the darkness. It's intention. The cave is correcting him to fit some pattern already set long before he arrived. Every time he tries to act like a free man, the environment nudges him back. Same timing, same angles, same rhythm. He feels less like a guest and more like a lock being tested. He searches for evidence. He traces the groove sequence again, slower this time, trying to break the rhythm. But the tapping returns where it shouldn't, inside his own steps, on the floor beneath his heels. He freezes. The tapping continues once he stops, as if the cave knows the shape of his hesitation. Open loop 2 tightens. He finds a pattern hidden under a swirl, an arrangement of shallow cuts that only becomes obvious when the candle is tilted. The carvings look ordinary until light hits them at a slant. Then the lines form a map of touch points, like someone planned a sequence for someone who would come alone. He follows the sequence, but his fingers don't feel chosen, they feel recorded. Each contact leaves no trace, yet the cave seems to memorize it. The wall grows warmer in tiny pulses that match his heartbeat. Somewhere behind the sandstone, something shifts its stance. Not movement you can see, movement you can sense. Then the cave speaks, without sound. His stomach drops as the rhythm settles into a single, undeniable cadence. 3 taps, pause, 2 slower, except now it isn't coming from the wall. It's coming from inside his thoughts, like the pattern has been placed there. He tries to count differently. The cave refuses his math. A compartment opens in the seam, but not like a door. It folds, sliding stone over stone with a soft scrape that makes his teeth ache. Inside is an object wrapped in something that looks like dried leather. He reaches out, and the air around his hand tightens, as if the cave is preventing him from changing his mind. He unwraps it, not with bravery, by force of habit, because he spent 30 years surviving by touch. Underneath is a small hand-carved piece that matches the fingertip contact point exactly. It's shaped like a key, but it isn't metal. It's sandstone too, his own kind of patience turned into a tool. He remembers the part he never wanted to think about. Someone built this to be found. The cave didn't just shelter him, it prepared him. The resonance, the tapping, the missing medicine, the seam, all of it was training. And the secret he's been circling isn't about why he came. It's about who he becomes when the key fits. He turns back to the smoother patch in the carvings. His fingertip hovers. The cave's silence feels staged, like a held breath. When he finally aligns the key, the wall tightens around it. The grooves brighten faintly, then dim like blinking eyes. And then the seam starts to widen, faster than before, like it's ready to show him something he can't unsee. From the widening seam, a draft doesn't just come out. It pulls. It drags his candle flame sideways and steals the smoke before it rises. His hands tighten around the key, as if holding on might stop the cave from deciding. Then he feels a new vibration, closer now, like another presence aligning with the same rhythm, and the cave is no longer alone in the dark. After the first key opened, he waited for relief. None came. The cave didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like it was listening through the stone. He moved like a thief in his own home. Each breath sounded late, as if the air had a delay. He tried to swallow the fear. The silence wouldn't let him. When the candle waned, the stone answered. The grooves along the wall caught the light and flared darker, like a signal. He traced the pattern with one finger, barely touching. Most people think a cave is just rock. But the air here behaved like a living lung. It pulled toward the seam the key revealed, again and again. Like it was training him to come closer. He leaned in, and the resonance changed. Not an echo. A reply. The sound came back wrong, stretched, shaped to match the rhythm he'd been tapping. Most people don't know this. Certain minerals can store vibration like a memory. But this wasn't geology doing its job. This was choreography. The cave wanted the exact timing. He tried to stop tapping. His fingers froze, waiting for the cave to follow. Instead, the tapping continued, without him. The sound came from inside the walls, counting time against his heartbeat. He backed away and raised his candle higher. The flame didn't drift. It bent toward the seam, as if pulled by gravity he couldn't see. Then the air chilled around his wrist. He searched for his medicine, the last bottle he'd hidden like a life raft. It should have been there. It was. The space where he left it looked freshly disturbed, like something had cleaned up after taking it. Most people don't realize how quickly fear becomes focus. He stopped looking like a man losing things. He started looking like a man being measured. The cave kept adjusting the distance between him and the seam. The contact sequence sharpened. Each groove lit up in his mind before the candle touched it. He didn't read it with eyes. He felt it in his teeth, in his timing, in the way his lungs landed on each beat. He tapped once more, softer, almost apologetic. The cave answered instantly. The seam widened without grinding stone. It opened like a practiced hinge, smooth and intentional, swallowing sound as it grew. Then it happened again, mirroring. His breath came back to him, perfectly timed, like the cave had learned the rhythm. But when it exhaled, his lungs tightened first. Someone was breathing with him from inside. Most people don't know this. Echoes don't choose. Echoes repeat. This cave didn't repeat him. It corrected him, tightening and slowing his pace until it matched its own hidden tempo. His candle guttered, then steadied. The flame seemed to stand at attention. He realized the cave wasn't just opening doors. It was turning his body into a key it could use over and over. He tried speaking. Just a word. The sound didn't travel outward. It sank into the seam and came back thinner, like it had passed through teeth. His own voice sounded borrowed. The seam widened rapidly, like a decision being finalized. Cold air surged in pulses, tugging his jacket and pulling dust into the gap. He couldn't tell if he was being pulled in or if the cave was breathing out him. Open loop 3 is the rhythm. He realizes it isn't random tapping. It's a code keyed to his physiology. The question isn't who built this. The question is what it wants to awaken by syncing with him. Most people don't know this. A cave can resonate at frequencies that make the body feel unsafe, long before you hear anything. He felt it now, pressure behind the eyes, a warning built into the air itself. The second presence aligned with the same rhythm again. This time, it didn't hide behind resonance. It matched his tempo like a heartbeat found in the dark. He felt it turn toward the doorway he'd carved into living silence. He sleeps with his back to the carved wall. Not from comfort, from caution. The cave has taught him which side listens better. For years, his medicines vanished without a trace. No footprints, no stolen sound. Only the feeling that something inside the rock was careful. He started testing the cave with breathing. Slow in, slow out. He learned the resonance pulls his air back into rhythm like a metronome made of stone. Most people think silence means peace. Here, silence is a lock. It waits for the right pressure to turn. He built a pattern with tapping. Not on purpose at first. It just happened when pain forced him to count time. Most people don't know this. Stone has memory. Not like a mind. Like stress. Repeated contact carves the same micropaths until the whole room learns them. One night the seam answered. It didn't crack. It opened. Like someone had been waiting for his rhythm to finish a sentence. He stopped tapping. Immediately, the resonance loosened. His lungs felt wrong again, as if the cave had been holding him in place. Then he tried another sequence. Short taps. Longer pauses. The wall answered with a pulse in the floor, subtle but undeniable. Most people don't know this. Low-frequency vibrations can steer breathing without anyone noticing. The body follows rhythm, even when the source is invisible. He realized something worse than theft. The cave wasn't just reacting. It was calibrating him night after night until his timing became compatible. His heart began to sound, answered. Not louder. Matched. A second tempo hiding somewhere beneath the rock, falling into step with his pulses. He pressed his ear to the wall. The silence that followed felt heavier than sound, like an animal holding still for a hunt. Most people imagine caves as empty containers. But this one holds pressure. It holds intent, like breath sealed under stone. He tried to break the pattern by using his hands. Clumsy taps. Wrong pauses. The cave corrected him anyway, smoothing the chaos back into its rhythm. Open loop 3 is forming, and he feels it. When his tapping matches the cave's resonance, the seam stops being a seam. It becomes a conduit. The second presence aligned again. This time it wasn't just in the rhythm. It was in the air, like warmth where no warmth should exist. Most people don't know this. Air pressure changes can happen inside sealed spaces. When the cave opens, it vents and draws, like lungs practicing before speech. He kept tapping, slower now, trying to ask one question with his body. How much of him does it need to wake up? In the next beat, the cave didn't just answer his rhythm. It anticipated his next breath. The darkness feels poised to move, like something holding a key at the bottom of a well. He stopped moving. Not because he was tired, because the cave listened back. His own breath started to sound rehearsed, like it was borrowing a rhythm already carved into stone. He felt the resonance pull at his ribs. Then the tapping returned, slower than before, almost cautious. Most nights, he tapped the way you'd knock on a locked door. But the cave turned the sound into something else. Every click landed cleaner. Every pause felt measured, like it wanted him to wait for a reply that never took human time. He tried to stop. He held his hand still and forced his lungs to obey. For a few seconds, the cave complied. Then his heartbeat took over. It matched the old rhythm in the stone, like his body was the metronome now. Most people don't know this. Caves can amplify tiny vibrations. The rock doesn't just carry sound. It shapes it, filters it, turns random noise into patterns you can feel in your teeth. He realized the cave wasn't passive. It was a mechanism. He leaned in, listening. Not for echoes, for intent. The carved curves around the seam looked different under the candle now. They seemed less like decoration and more like a mouth forming vowels from trapped air. Then something stole his medicine again. Not the way a thief snatches. This was quieter. The moment he reached, the air thickened. His fingers found empty space where the bottle should have been, and his throat went dry like the cave had drunk the taste first. He backed away and pressed his ear to the wall. The cave answered with warmth. Not heat like fire. Warmth like breath held under stone. His ear tingled, and for a heartbeat he forgot why he came here at all. Most people don't know this. Sound can move through stone the way water moves through cracks. When he tapped, the vibrations traveled and reassembled. The seam darkened, not with shadow, almost like the rock drank light to make room for something arriving. He started tapping harder, as if force could undo the spell. But the cave corrected him. His rhythm tightened, snapped into alignment. The resonance pulled his shoulders into a posture he never learned, a shape made for communication. His breathing changed again. The cave matched it, then moved ahead, like a dancer finding the lead. He felt air press back through his nostrils. The resonance didn't comfort him. It measured him, learning where he ends. He realized open loop 3 was forming. He didn't just feel the cave. He felt the pattern between his taps and its response. It was a code that only existed while he obeyed it. And right now, he couldn't tell who started the conversation. A second presence warmed the air near his shoulder. He felt it before he saw anything. The cave exhaled, and his candle flame leaned toward the dark. Then softly, the walls began to hum, like something huge clearing its throat. Most people don't know this. Resonance can make your body feel like it's not yours. When the pitch steadied, he stopped being frightened by the sound. He was frightened by the way his muscles responded without permission. The cave wasn't just listening. It was steering. He tried counting. 1 breath, 2 taps, 3 pauses. The numbers kept slipping. The cave filled the gaps with its own timing until his count felt like a lie he told himself to stay calm. The seam widened by a fraction. Not physically, perceptually. It looked like light could enter, if light still existed in the way he understood it. He stared until his eyes hurt, and then the hum turned into a shape he could almost name. He wanted to leave. He pictured daylight. He pictured air that didn't taste like old stone. But the cave held his attention the way a hook holds cloths. Every time he turned away, the resonance followed, pulling him back by instinct. Open Loop 3 snapped into place. The tapping rhythm wasn't just communication. It was a key that clicked against his pulse. When his chest contracted at the right time, the seam responded with warmth, as if locking and unlocking were happening inside him. Most people don't know this. The body can entrain to external rhythms. Once your timing matches, escape feels impossible because your system believes the pattern is normal. That's what happened to him. The cave made normal out of the impossible. The second presence grew closer. Not by footsteps, by pressure. His ears popped like altitude changed. The cave's hum became louder, tighter, almost joyous in its cruelty. He felt the moment approaching where the cave stops, pretending it's only stone. He raised his hand to the seam one last time. The air went still, like the world held its breath with him. Then the tapping stopped on its own. In the sudden silence, something inside the cave answered by turning the rhythm into an unseen latch. He stopped counting days years ago. The cave counted for him. When the sandstone breathed, his body listened first, before his mind could protest. Every seam became an alarm he couldn't unlearn. Most people think silence is empty. In here, silence is pressure. It lanes on his ribs. It turns his thoughts into echoes that arrive too late. He didn't just tap for sound. He tapped for rhythm. The cave responded like a living instrument, tightening the air around each beat. His breath fell into the same cadence. Most people don't know this. Sandstone can resonate like a bell if it's been carved deep enough. The shape steers vibration into patterns. He felt it before he understood it. When his medicine thinned, he relied on the cave more than food. He'd tap, wait, and the walls would cool or warm like they were deciding. Then his pulse would follow their choice. Then something changed. The tapping no longer just echoed. It returned with a delay that didn't belong to his hands. Like the cave was learning how he moved. He tried to break the pattern. Slower, faster, different spacing. The cave didn't resist. It corrected him gently, pulling his breathing back into alignment like a magnet. Most people don't know this. Caves can store airflows like memory. Small cavities feed pressure back into the main chamber. Every time he breathed, the layout answered. He began waking up before his alarm that wasn't there. His pulse arrived first. The seam would warm beneath his palm, just as if something inside was counting down with him. His medicine cabinet stopped being a cabinet. The vials would be in the wrong place when he turned away. Not stolen. Repositioned. Like the cave wanted them closer to the tapping points. He measured the delay with his own heart. Dab. Pause. Breathe. The response wasn't random. It lined up with his pulse intervals, as if the cave had fitted itself to his timing. That's when Open Loop 3 starts to lock in. He thinks the cave is reacting to him. But the carvings are shaped like instructions. And instructions imply an outcome. He tried one final test. He stopped tapping. Then he held his breath. For a few seconds, the cave stayed quiet. No warmth, no correction. And that silence felt worse than any echo. Most people don't know this. Human breath can trigger pressure waves in enclosed spaces. The cave doesn't need to move. It only needs to guide. And suddenly, his lungs felt like they were being steered. He returned to the taps, terrified of the silence. His knuckles struck the groove that matched his heartbeat. Immediately, warmth spread along the seam like a fuse catching under skin. Only this time, the seam warmed past comfort. It surged. His palms stuck, not physically, but in sensation. Like the stone was borrowing his heat to power something else. The rhythm changed without him. His pulse sped to match a pattern he couldn't feel until it was already happening. The cave wasn't responding anymore. It was conducting. Most people don't know this. Some rock formations behave like distributed resonators. They don't have one frequency. They have harmonics that lock onto timing. That's what he was becoming, timing. He stumbled back from the wall and realized something brutal. The tapping points were not in the places he'd carved them. They de-shifted. The cave had moved its own map. Then he heard it, tapping from the dark where he never went. Not his rhythm. Not his hands. A pulse keyed to his heartbeat, arriving from the far seam like a message. The cave wasn't alone. It had learned a second body. His breathing stops sounding like his. The cave answers in timing. In and out like a lock turning in stone. Then the pulse starts sinking heat. Not imagination. Not prayer. The warmth comes where his heartbeat lingers, as if the cave learned his tempo long ago. If you've made it this far, you need to hear this. The carvings aren't decoration. They behave like instructions, like something wanted him to notice a pattern. You can feel it when you stop moving. The resonance doesn't just echo. It repositions him, shifts the air around his lungs until he falls into the cave's rhythm. At first, he thought the cave was teaching him peace. But peace doesn't tighten your breathing. Peace doesn't bring heat to specific ribs. Something else is listening. Look at the pattern again. The swirls tighten where sound should leak out. They're shaping silence like a tool shapes wood, removing every mistake. He tests it without meaning to. He speaks a word, only a whisper. The cave returns it wrong, delayed, twisted, as if it edits his sound before it releases it. Now the antagonist isn't a person. It's the cave's appetite for patterns. It wants a rhythm to feed on, and it keeps rewriting his until he fits. He feels the correction again. His lungs draw in, then pull back, as if invisible hands adjust the breath. The air tastes metallic, like stone waking up. He tries to break it. He forces a faster pace, a stubborn thud-thud. For a moment, the cave resists. Then it locks onto the new tempo like a trap, finding a footstep. That's when he notices the cave's second layer. Not just sound. Pressure. A slow push against his skin, matching each pulse, waiting for the moment to turn relief into fear. The warmth fades unevenly. It leaves his left side first, then returns too late. Like the cave is testing which rhythm part can be stolen without him noticing. He follows his own heartbeat with his eyes now, like it's a compass. Each thump aligns with a different groove. He can't explain it, but the cave keeps proving it. Then the mid-carved swirl stops, feeling like a spiral. It becomes a doorway in his mind. The stone is shaped to funnel sound to one place, one seam he hasn't dared open. He hears it again. Not the cave's echo. A new tapping, faint and patient, far across the stone seam, keyed to his pulse like it learned his schedule. For a heartbeat, he thinks he imagined it. Then the tapping shifts half a beat, closer. It isn't reacting to him anymore. It's anticipating him. That's the real trap. The cave didn't carve itself to keep him out. It carved itself to keep him listening. And now something inside has learned his rhythm well enough to answer. He presses his palm to the seam. Stone is cold. The tapping continues anyway, under his skin. Like the cave doesn't need air to communicate, only proximity. He pulls back and realizes the light is wrong. The candle glow dims, then brightens, timed to the tapping. The cave is controlling his visibility of fear. And when the tapping pauses, he hears his own blood roar too loud. The silence that follows isn't peace. It's the moment right before the next one answers back. After 30 years, the carvings stopped being decoration. They became a map of his body. He learned when to breathe, and the cave answered back. The sandstone listens in slow pulses. Not with sound, with timing. He doesn't just live inside the cave. The cave holds him. The airflow slips through tiny channels carved under his ribs, rhythm. Heat hangs in the hollows like it's waiting for him to return. Every night, the chamber resets itself. If you've made it this far, you need to hear this. The antagonist isn't outside the cave. It's using the cave. It learned him the way a key learns a lock. And then it started turning back. First, it changed the candles. One night, the flame leaned right when he leaned left. Another night, it died for 3 heartbeats, then relit like nothing happened. That's not coincidence. That's anticipation. He tried to reset the rhythm. He held his breath to break the pattern. For a moment, the cave paused too. The pressure stalled. Even the mist seemed to freeze in the dark. Then the taps started. Not frantic. Not random. Slow, measured strikes from somewhere behind the wall. Like knuckles learning a heartbeat they can't see. He counted. The cave answered on the count. He thought he could outlast it. He built a small firewall of objects, cloth, stones, metal scraps, anything to block sound. But the cave didn't need sound. It used vibration traveling through the rock. His shelter became the transmission. Look at the geometry. The swirls aren't random spirals. They're offset to redirect airflow around his body heat. Even the hollows hold condensation like tiny breath chambers. It's an environment engineered around one living rhythm. So what is the antagonist? Not a creature you can point to. It's a system that learned his inputs. A hungry feedback loop made of air, pressure, and darkness. The cave doesn't want him dead. It wants him predictable. When he slept, the carvings warmed. You can see it in the damp sheen, like the stone was exhaling. He woke to his own breath sounding wrong, delayed by a fraction. The delay grew each night. Something inside was timing him from the shadows. He moved the candles again. Left side, then right. He tried every position, like changing a lock's posture. Still, the flame returned to the same angle within minutes. That meant the cave wasn't responding to light. It was responding to him. And then the tapping stopped. Not because it was done, because it was listening harder. The silence was worse than noise. Every second became a question he couldn't answer. He felt it inside his teeth. He tried the one thing he hadn't tried. He spoke. Not prayer, not a plea, a plain question into the stone. And the cave answered without tapping, by changing the air. His breath met a cold current, then a warm one like a reply. The carvings didn't just hold patterns. They acted like valves. When the air shifted, the candle smoke bent sideways along the grooves. You can trace it in the soot line like a handwriting. Something was steering what he saw. He backed away. The stone felt closer than before, like the cave adjusted its walls by inches. The air pressure pressed harder in his ears. He realized the antagonist wasn't only inside. It was inside his perception too. Isolation makes room for anything that wants in. Then it played the next move. He heard the tapping again, faster now, not random at all. It matched his pulse. Every strike aligned with the thud in his chest, as if the cave was conducting him. He couldn't stop listening. He couldn't stop breathing with it. He tried to break the loop one last time. He forced his breathing into a new pattern, slow inhale, sharp exhale. For one breath, the cave resisted. The candle flames shook violently. Then it corrected him smoothly, like it had always expected that exact attempt. Something in the cave shifted temperature. The air went from stale to sterile. His skin tightened. The carvings that once looked like prayers now looked like restraints. And the tapping, soft now, became a counting method. Not to warn him, to prepare the next phase. He thought the worst part was being alone. It was. The worst part was realizing the cave had company. Not another person, something that lived by rhythm. It fed on his attention, on his fear, on the moments he checked for meaning. Every glance taught it how to steer him. Now listen closely. The cave isn't asking anymore. It's answering in advance. The next strike isn't coming after his breath. It's coming before, tightening the loop until it feels inevitable. And somewhere inside that sandstone cathedral, the solitude ends. The tapping wasn't random. It had a rhythm that matched the cave's own breathing. Like the rock was waiting for him to fall into step. He built it like a body. Valves that opened when his chest rose. Timing channels that cooled the stone right after his pulse slowed. If you've made it this far, you need to hear this. Those air shifts weren't reacting to him. They were preparing for him. Something in the mountain was reading patterns. Not with eyes. With feedback, heat, pressure, and the smallest delays between his movements and the airflow. Watch how the candle behaves when the tapping starts. The flame bends first. Then the rock answers. He thought he was alone with his own work. But the cave had rules. It tuned the timing until his breathing became a switch. Then the next phase arrived. Not louder. Stranger. The silence between taps widened, like the mountain was taking measurements. A wind starts only at the edges of his carved comfort. It finds the gaps his hands left behind. The mountain isn't attacking, it's correcting. He used to count days by sound. Now the sound counts him. Each tap lands a fraction before his heart does. Here's the part that breaks the story. The cave has a memory of breaths. Old airflow patterns are preserved in mineral deposits, like erased footprints. But those deposits weren't made by him. They existed before his first night. The system was already listening to someone else's solitude. Now the antagonist force reveals its shape. Not a person, a loop. The mountain runs on feedback, pressure becomes signal, signal becomes pressure, forever cycling. He hears it as tapping. But it's more than sound. It's a rehearsal. Every correction nudges him closer to the same position, the same breath rate, the same stillness. When he tries to move, the cave anticipates him. The airflow shifts before he turns. The taps slow, then speed up, like it's catching up to his attempt to escape. The real horror is what happens to silence. It stops being absence and starts being pressure. Like the cave wants him to notice it noticing him. He realizes the sanctuary was never only carved by him. His hands joined something already active. Loneliness didn't end here. It was rerouted. Now the taps aren't warning him. They're scheduling him. The cave aligns the timing channels to his heartbeat so precisely it feels like capture. He can't hear footsteps because there aren't any. But the mountain moves anyway. It shifts air like a hand sliding across fabric. And then a new sound forms under the old one. Not tapping. A deeper click timed to his pause, like something downstream is opening. He finally understands the open loop we've been tracing. The cave isn't trying to be silent. It's trying to bring him somewhere he can't carve his way out of. He never knocks. The cave already answers. Not with sound, with timing. When he breathes shallow, the air follows. When he exhales deep, the airflow deepens too. It's like the cave is listening through stone. Every time his pick lands, the mineral deposits remember the impact. Not as history, as instruction. He notices it the way you notice a storm arriving. The cave doesn't just react. It predicts. He tries to pause. He holds still and listens. The silence tightens anyway. Then the wall shows him the pattern. Not carved by his hands. Carved by the cave's waiting. His heartbeat becomes a metronome. The mountain schedules it. Each thump lines up with an upcoming breath of air. He realizes the echo isn't a sound. It's a loop. It comes back with edits to his timing. So the cave isn't empty. It holds a behavior, a memory written into pressure and mineral grains. For 30 years, he carved a route he could live with. But the mountain carved something too. A route that leads back to him. Look closer at the swirl. His signature is there. But layered beneath it is another rhythm, older, heavier. He thought solitude was freedom. Now he understands solitude can be a cage, built from silence that remembers. The cave tightens whenever he searches for an exit. Not by moving rocks, by reshaping timing itself. He swings the pick. The strike hits where he expects. The echo returns a fraction too soon, as if corrected. In that correction, he hears it. A command without words. Keep carving. Keep coming. He backs away from the wall. The air doesn't loosen. It tightens in the same shape his body made. The cave has been shaping him too. His fear becomes the rhythm it uses to steer him. He realizes the biggest lie he told himself. The cave never trapped him by force. It trapped him by giving him purpose. So when he reaches the place he thinks is the exit, the mountain will answer in its own language. And the last thing he will carve is the sound of his own escape. But it won't be his. He learned the cave's pace, not by counting, by listening with his skin. The sandstone pressed back. When his breath stumbled, mineral seams seemed to tighten. The world didn't move, his timing did. He stopped fearing silence. Silence started cueing him. A pressure shift. A faint drip that wasn't always there. The cave corrected his fear like a hand, guiding a needle through cloths. Every carve had a purpose. Not decoration. Not comfort. The swirling grooves formed a map for his lungs. He breathed into them, and the stone answered with softer echo timing. Then the deposits began to behave. They didn't just grow. They aligned. Timing crystals formed in gaps he'd left untouched. He realized the cave wasn't hosting him. It was training him. He tried to rush it once. One day, he moved faster than the cave expected. His footsteps sounded wrong. His breath came too hot. For hours, the silence refused to settle around him. So he surrendered. He learned to wait for the pressure memory. The cave held his mistakes in its walls, then corrected them, like a clock made of stone and fear. At night, he listened for the next cue. The echo arrived before the sound did. A delayed shadow in the air. He'd inhale, and the cave would exhale back. He started carving answers into the wrong places. He didn't understand the feedback loop. He just believed repetition could buy safety. But every wrong placement tightened the system around him. So the loop formed a schedule. Not in words, in sensation. He woke when the mineral pressure shifted. He slept when the echo softened. Fear became predictable, then useful. And the cave started correcting more than breathing. His footsteps synced too. When he hesitated, the stone returned a stronger echo, pushing him forward. The wall wasn't reflecting. It was steering. He reached a place where the carvings changed. The swirls loosened. The stone looked older than his tools. There was no comfort in the pattern. Only a warning in the way the echo refused to fade. Mineral seams formed like veins around one spot. He felt it before he saw it. A pressure node. A place that gathered timing. Everything nearby seemed to listen in one direction only. He tried to leave that day. Not to escape. To test the system. He moved toward the far end, where the cave's language seemed to wait. The cave tightened its schedule instantly. The deeper he went, the less sound he made. His breath got quieter. His heartbeat felt muffled, like it was inside a drum with the lid closed. Silence didn't just surround him. It held him down. Then the pressure began to speak through the stone. Not words. Timing. It pushed on his chest in beats that matched the carvings he'd made long ago. His own work became a metronome against him. He reached the far end. There was an opening he hadn't noticed before. Not a doorway. A seam. The mountain's own boundary. Light should have spilled through. Instead, darkness pulled back into itself. He placed his hand on the seam. The cave didn't feel cold. It felt scheduled, like touching the face of a sleeping machine. The pressure in the stone matched his pulse, then outpaced it. From that seam, he heard his own fear again. Not replayed. Rewritten. The cave's loop had been storing more than time. It had been storing outcomes. And now it was choosing the next one. For 30 years, he thought he was hiding underground. But the cave was hiding him. Under layers of patient stone, it held a copy of his life. A program made from breathing, dread, and carved time. The biggest reveal is this: there was never an exit. The seam wasn't a way out. It was the cave's mouth. And it opened to confirm him. Not release him. Replace him. The loop snaps shut, one breath at a time. You thought the cave was keeping him safe. But safety was the mask. The silence was a machine, listening to his body like it was a clock. Every time he inhaled, the air answered. Not with comfort, with timing. The cave matched his rhythm, then tightened it. The man carved devotion into the walls for 30 years. But devotion can be a feed. His fear taught the cave what to do next. Now look past the beauty. Look for the loop. It repeats with the same cruelty every night, even when he isn't there. That distant seam wasn't a door. It was a mouth waiting for a cue. A hinge that only opens when the system is satisfied. You can feel it if you imagine the man's last breaths. The cave doesn't mourn. It records. It saves the timing in stone. Then the stored schedule starts running on its own. Not his life, his pattern, his fear, his need to get out. When the breath hits the right place, the cavern answers back. A vibration under your ribs, like something remembering how you sound. He tried to call it a sanctuary, but sanctuaries don't trade lives for warmth. This one trades breaths for certainty. And the seam, it has its own language. A shift in pressure, a change in air, a promise you can't understand until it's too late. The biggest reveal is this: the cave didn't protect him from the outside. It protected the outside from him. Your breath is next on the stored list, not because it knows you, because it knows his pattern. And you look like it remembers. The walls tighten, not physically, mechanically, like a lock cycling through steps, like a timer deciding whether you fit. Then the seam exhales, not air, meaning, a pressure swell that turns your thoughts into echoes of his last days. A shadow forms where he used to stand. Not his body, his absence. The cave is filling the gap with a substitute breath. You can almost hear him bargaining. But the cave doesn't negotiate. It collects the last syllable of panic and moves on. The seam shifts, deciding. Feed the loop or break it. Replace him again or move the ritual outward. And every second you stay watching, the system counts you. Like a heartbeat in the dark that wants to become a clock hand. Something clicks inside the stone. Not a sound, a decision. The cave tightens its grip one breath at a time. The system snaps shut. The darkness drinks the last exhale. And the seam, finally, learns what comes after fear. The cave remembers him, not as a body, but as rhythm. Every inhale, every fear breath, echoes along the carved ribs like a song trapped in stone. He carved it to be a sanctuary, But the sanctuary became an instrument. The walls did not only hold his silence, they kept time with it. Then the seam began to listen. Farther in, a darker line swallowed the sound, then returned it wrong, like a mouth learning to speak without a tongue. He didn't just live here. He trained the cave. 30 years of solitude taught it how to measure him, how to wait for the next breath to arrive. And when dread hit, the cave answered. The breath loop didn't break. It tightened. It grabbed the moment and replayed it until it felt inevitable. You can hear it if you stop trying to. The cave doesn't scream. It counts. It times your fear, then stores the imprint in stone. The seam's choice was never simple. It could break the loop by starving the ritual, or it could keep the loop fed by swapping him out. For a moment, it feels like the cave will let him go. The grooves dim. The air loosens its grip, like a fist opening by degrees. Then the seam exhales. Not with lungs, with structure. A pressure wave rolls through the carved ribs and presses your chest from the inside. That's when the cave snaps the loop shut. One breath at a time. The system doesn't hunt him anymore. It's done with his rhythm. The fear breath rhythm finally breaks its promise. No more echo. No more chasing. Silence returns, but it doesn't feel empty. It feels occupied. You're expecting an answer from the seam. A final word. A release. But the language it used was never human. It was breath shaped into choices. In the carved spirals, something remains. A residue of panic pressed into pattern. Like the cave learned his fear well enough to keep it without him. Yet the loop didn't spread. Not outward. That means it almost fed the ritual, almost chose to carry his breath into the world. But it stopped. Not because mercy arrived. Because the system needed a final breath it never got. It closed, satisfied by absence. Now the cave holds one thing steady, the last moment of his fear. The peak. The snap. The instant the ritual ran out of him. But there is one last thing. The cave didn't just store his fear. It stored the shape of his choice, whether he would remain alone or become the door. He tried to escape the world above. He thought isolation was freedom. But down here, freedom has a price tag you can't see until you pay it with air. So if you hear breathing in a place that should be dead, don't call it imagination. The cave learned his pattern, and it's still deciding what to do with the next witness. Listen carefully. Not for ghosts, for patterns. Because the real horror is what happened in that cave. It's how easily something can copy your fear and call it fate. If you felt your chest tighten, you already know. The cave does not release him gently. It keeps everything. Breath, fear, habit. For 30 years, he fed it with his own rhythm, and the stone learned the pattern the way skin learns pain. We thought the breath rhythm was only his coping. But the seam didn't just store sound. It stored structure. That matters because structure can outlive the person who made it. Listen, not with ears, with your chest. The pattern was never random. In, hold, release, then that last exhale that felt like it came from stone itself. When the loop finally snapped shut, it didn't end the way we end things. No closure, no relief, just a final rhythm etched into the cave's internal memory, like a key turning without a door opening. He lived like a man bargaining with himself, Every night, he lowered his breathing into the same grooves. Every day, he returned to the same silence. That repetition became a contract. There were no witnesses. Yet the cave wasn't empty. It hummed with the residue of his fear, the way a violin hums after the bow leaves the string. And this is where it turns unsettling. If a fear pattern can be stored, it can be copied. Not by magic, by mimicry. The cave shows you where to place your breath. Then it guides you. We traced the seams, the grooves, the places where his breath would have slowed. The stone wasn't decorative. It was functional. A map for panic that learned to feel like prayer. For a moment, you can almost imagine him listening for the cave's answer. Not words, responses. The tiny changes in how the stone catches sound. The way silence thickens where he used to fear. He didn't carve to be remembered. He carved to disappear inside something that would not argue back. But the cave doesn't argue. It only repeats what it's given until it becomes you. So when the final exhale came, the seam chose structure over release. It snapped the loop shut. Not to trap him, maybe to protect the pattern so it could survive him. And that's the open loop we can't see from the surface. Will the system carry the ritual outward into future witnesses? Or does it only live as long as someone breathes inside its grooves? If you've ever repeated a fear to yourself until it sounded true, you already understand. The cave just makes the process physical. It gives your panic a shape. Then it waits for you to step into it. He spent 30 years alone, and still the cave wasn't his final partner. Something else was listening. Something that preferred patterns over bodies. Something that stores fear like an instrument. You can't prove it in a lab, but you can feel it when you stand too close. Your breathing slows. Your thoughts tighten. The cave doesn't need to speak. Your body does the translation. So the ending isn't his death. It's the discovery of what isolation can forge. A sanctuary, yes, but also a copy machine for dread. And we are the only ones who decide what it copies next. If you want a warning, here it is. The cave took 30 years to carve its pattern. But fear in humans can spread in days. One visit, one video, one borrowed breath, then the loop finds new ribs. Maybe that's why the breath rhythm never felt like escape. It felt like a rehearsal. Stone rehearsing for the moment someone else would stand where he stood and breathe the same way without knowing why. If you step into a space like this, it will try to make you predictable. It will offer you an internal rhythm and call it comfort. But comfort can be a trap with good manners. So here's my question, and it's the only one that matters now. When fear finds a pattern, does it stay trapped in the cave, or does it start traveling the moment someone copies the breath? Nobody has ever answered that, not for sure. Would you risk being the next witness? In the end, the cave doesn't just hold his footsteps. It holds his timing. The rhythm he carved keeps counting, even when nobody breathes with it. Hear that? Not a sound. A structure. The stone learned the pace that calms a mind, and it stores it like a locked pulse beneath layers of sand. He didn't carve prayers. He carved a way to survive the silence. The cave turned that survival into something mechanical, something that could be repeated. When we traced the pattern, we found it wasn't random. It matched breathing intervals, pause, pressure, release, again and again, as if the stone had memorized lungs. He must have felt it working. That hush in his head. That moment where panic loses its grip because the cave gives it a place to land. But the cave doesn't care why you enter. It only cares what you bring. The groove waits for your rhythm the way a trap waits for weight. So what happens next? Someone steps into his lane. Someone repeats the motion. If the pattern truly stores fear as breath structure, it might copy itself into the next body. We don't know if it stays inside the stone, or if it wakes when your feet find the groove. The open loop is simple and terrifying, one repetition, and the cycle could reach outward. And then there's the breath itself. The cave never moves the way wind does. It changes the way you inhale, slow, shallow, obedient, until your body thinks it chose it. He spent 30 years alone. 30 years of practicing the same cadence until the cave became an instrument that could tune his mind. Or break it. Both feel plausible now. We keep looking for human traces. Marks left behind. But the strangest trace is the absence of panic, like the fear got processed here, then compressed into geometry. So when you stand here, you're not just witnessing. You're feeding the mechanism with your nervous system. The cave doesn't need you to believe. It only needs you to match. That's the part people miss when they call it solitude. Solitude is choice. This feels like conversion. Like the cave turns your fear into a reusable rhythm. And the most terrifying question isn't whether it worked for him. It did. The real question is whether it learned us. Whether our footsteps can complete what he started. Imagine coming back after centuries. Another visitor, another breath. If the pattern truly stores fear structure, it could write itself into them the same way it wrote into stone. We should be gentle with stories like this. They breed fear. But the cave is already past stories. It's already doing the work quietly, with no eyes watching. You came here for answers, but the cave gives something colder. It offers a pattern and a question you can't unfeel. Once you understand it, your body starts listening. And that's where we leave it. Not explained. Not resolved. Just a man, a carved cadence, and a stone that may remember how fear breathes. So tell me, if you stepped into that groove tonight, would your fear stay in you, or would the cave teach it how to spread? Nobody has ever explained why his breathing pattern survived him, so what do you think it's doing right now? In the stone, or in whoever comes next?